Greetings and salutations, friends. My name is, of course, Charles Q. Banks, and I'd like to welcome you back to the Own It 365 Whole Bible Plan. And today we are going to be on day 11, trying to do this as quickly as possible to catch up to where I ought to be. Again, apologies for the missed days. So, today is Genesis 25 and 26, as well as Job 18 and 19. So, now, most forget about Keturah, Abraham's second wife. Genesis 25 begins with Abraham and his second wife having children. And this is the wife that Abraham has after Sarah's death and subsequent burial in Mamre, and so, or near the oaks of Mamre in the cave. And so, yes, Abraham was married after Sarah died to a woman named Keturah, who bore many different sons and a daughter to Abraham. And these are very important in the rest of the scripture, but there are very few and far between mentions of them, especially when considering the amount of time that is spent on Abraham's and Isaac's sons and daughters. They're not mentioned a whole lot. As also something that's not mentioned a whole lot is Abraham's concubines. It says that Abraham had children through Keturah and other concubines. Let that one sink in. That's definitely something wrong that Abraham did. That polygamy and concubinage is seen throughout the Bible, but these were negative practices brought over by Abraham and his wives and everything from Chaldea. And they did not have this practice all over the world at this time. Many Middle Eastern countries did, but the point is, it was a negative thing. It goes against God's law and the law of Moses, and is definite that God views these as sins, even though Moses' law had not been given yet. These things can be applied throughout history, not just to Moses and those who came after. I want that to be very clear. So, after this, Abraham dies at 175 years, and it says that God, not man, blesses Isaac after Abraham's death, just like I said in the last video. It then has the descendants of Ishmael, and says that Ishmael settled from Havilah to Shur, east of Egypt, and that he did it in defiance of all his relations. This is showing the defiance of Ishmael only 2 generations after they left. I mean, it makes sense. Just think about it. You know, your mother and you get thrown out into the desert to die immediately after it is decided that your brother will have the inheritance and not you. That's going to definitely cause distance between you and your family. So, that's very interesting to note that there's defiance even at such an early time. Then it's the lineage of Isaac, which is very short at this point because it hasn't been shown how many children he has yet. It then very importantly states that Isaac cried out to the Lord because Rebekah was barren. Many forget that Rebekah was barren, and it's very important to note the consistency of the recurring theme of barrenness in Abraham's line, and throughout the Bible, I should say. So many unfortunate things: barrenness, Abraham and Sarah's sins, his polygamy, all of these different things, Ishmael and Hagar, all these different things tried to get in the way of the bearing of the seed and the fulfillment of the covenant. But Isaac prays, okay? And humans can pray to God, and God listens, especially in accordance to his will. Yes, but the promise of the seed to crush the serpent's head is brought to pass again. Rebekah has a child, and it's miraculous. I want to restate how miraculous it is for a barren person to have a child. It doesn't happen all that often in real life. It does actually happen, so people don't think of it as a miracle that much, but every time the barren person has a child, it is a miracle. So yeah, not only does she conceive, she has twins who struggle together in the womb, and it of course is Jacob and Esau. And remember, this would cause her considerable pain to have twins struggling in the womb. Just having one child struggle in the womb is enough to cause considerable pain to a normal pregnancy. A normal woman, I should say, in pregnancy. So she prays to God, asking why. And he answers. And this has been a theme in my videos, that asking why is not a problem. Having a bad attitude is a problem, but asking God why the negative things in your life are happening is a good thing to do. It's not an evil thing at all, and God actually answers this time. And I've heard so many people actually say it to the contrary, that it is not for us to reason why, 'tis for us to do or die, or, you know, something similar, like, you know, God works in mysterious ways, it's not for us to question them. But the truth of God is way more hopeful than that. There are certain things we may never know, but God shows in his word that it is okay to ask him why, and he will answer. So God prophesies to her. God is a prophet, especially since he knows all things. So he prophesies to her 2 things. 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples shall come from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Esau came out red and hairy like a fur garment. The other came out gripping Esau's heel, and they named them accordingly. Isaac was 60 years old when they were, you know, born, meaning that he probably had to wait multiple decades for this to happen, for the birth of Jacob and Esau. He'd probably been praying for decades, in other words, because he actually was married to her sometime in his 30s. So that's a long time to wait. But God actually answers in his time. He does answer, but it may take 30 years before it actually happens. And of course, we know the story. The twins grew. Esau became a hunter of the plains, and Jacob was more of a homebody or a mama's boy. You know, the father preferred Esau, and the mother preferred Jacob. So, yeah, Esau sells his birthright to Jacob because he wanted some of Jacob's lentil stew, saying, "That red stuff." And I looked this up online as well. It's very ironic, seeing that Esau was described as being ruddy, or red-skinned, and he wanted red stuff, and was later called Edom, which is very close to the root word of Adam, which means red earth. Very interesting indeed. You can look more into that yourself on the Bible Hub, and I'll put that link in the description below as well. The names mean a lot, okay, and they have a lot of significance. Later on down the line, Edom and Esau can definitely be very well, like, compared to negative Adam. As in the New Testament, Adam is thought of as the first man, but he's also the one who brought sin into the world, with, you know, the help of Satan, of course. And it's shown that Esau is a type of negative Adam, taking the lentil stew, just as Adam took the fruit. Whereas Jacob is something different. He is the supplanter, and that has interesting connotations as well. But that's it for this. Well, no, it's not it. We're going on to Genesis 26. That's it for Genesis 25. So, another famine forces Isaac and company to sojourn in the land of Gerar, again, just like Abraham did, under King Abimelech, the same king that Abraham spoke to, of the Philistines. I don't remember it being said that Abimelech was the king of the Philistines when Abraham was there, but he is the king of the Philistines, who became, later on, the greatest enemy of Israel. And again, the Lord appeared to Isaac. He makes appearances so often, visibly, to the people he's talking to. And he passes the covenant to him, of course, and his descendants forever. He does this because, quote, Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Not just because of what Isaac did, but because of what Abraham did, does Isaac get the covenant. And that's very similar to Christ in that it's what he does and not what we do, specifically, obeying laws, that allows us to have the covenant and the promises. And I can't help but see the similarities to Abraham and Isaac, to Christ here, because it kept coming back into my mind. The thing, the prophecy that says, "Out of Egypt have I called my son." And this was a prophecy by Hosea of a future Christ, while also being a present declaration in Exodus for the children of Israel, leaving Egypt, as well as the seeking of the promised land and never returning to Egypt for Isaac, coming out of Egypt, the land of Abraham's sojournings. So yeah, it's important to note that whenever there is a prophecy, there is always a present, past, and future fulfillment of it. And that's definitely true for this as well, as I just explained. So, let's get on with it. While staying in Gerar, the exact same thing happens again with Isaac and Rebekah, which happened to Abraham and Sarah. She's beautiful, so Isaac, fearing for his life, says she's his sister. Again, this time, before any true mischief can befall them, Abimelech, who's been through this before with Abraham and Sarah, comes to them, sees that Isaac has affection towards her. It either says that he's laughing with her in one translation, or that he was caressing her. Either case, he sees the affection towards her, and comes and says, what are you doing? Someone could have lain with her, with your wife. She is your wife, not your sister. Why did you lie to us? And he says, of course, because he feared for his life, his own life, and so he put his wife on the line rather than his life, which is really weird. And so, he fears for his own life way more than his wife, but the Philistines and Egyptians really cared about adultery way more than, just, having, than we think they do. Like, to such a degree that Abimelech puts protections on Isaac and Rebekah, because Rebekah was so beautiful. And so that's just crazy, the amount of moral fiber that they had against adultery, when we obviously know they had idolatry going on at the same time, but they were really concerned about adultery for some reason. And probably because God rained down wrath upon Egypt and Abimelech when they tried to take Sarah before. So yeah, we can't even relate to that in our modern society. America, fornication is okay, as well as adultery, most of the time. Even though it's frowned upon, it's still like, it happens all the time. And we don't view it as like this big judgment coming down upon us, but they did in the ancient world. So, just like Abraham, God's blessings fall upon Isaac, and he becomes filthy rich, like a king, not just some nomad. Now, the Philistines were kind to Abraham and his lot, no pun intended, especially due to the pact that Abimelech signed with him. But as soon as Abraham is dead, boom, they fill up all of the wells that Abraham ever built, which is crazy. Like, what? Why would you do that? This forces Isaac to have to redig all of the old wells, going into the land and having disputes with the Philistines over each and every well, which was probably very messy. And he and Abimelech have to sign another pact again. It was probably something that Abimelech wanted to do to make them sign a pact, which is very underhanded. And Rican and they have peace, of course, once more. And all of the old ones are dug. And yeah. And God, once more, appears to Isaac. This is like the third time he's appeared to Isaac, and reconfirms his covenant with him. And Isaac builds an altar and a well on the spot at Beersheba. So, moving on to Job, 18 and 19. Bildad comes onto the scene this time and doubles down on the condemnation of the wicked in this life and the next. He goes so far this time, and to such an extent, he gives some pretty extreme descriptions of the fate of the wicked. He says, the wicked's skin is devoured by disease, and the firstborn of death devours his limbs. Like, geez. He once again disregards the fact that there are those wicked that don't see a whole lot of persecution in this life, and that there are good people who really go through some horrible things. So yeah, Job takes Bildad's words against the wicked as an insult to himself, because according to Bildad, only the wicked have bad things happening to them. And of course, Job is going through horrible torments as well. And so he's like, you're calling me wicked, he calls him out on that. And so Job continues his travailing, stating that both God and his friends persecute him, and he cries for justice, and that there is no justice. This is a grave miscalculation on his part. God, there's always justice with God. Nevertheless, Job suddenly shows a glimpse of blind faith. This is a very interesting part. That, it's like a glimpse of the truth and the faith that resides in Job, even through all of this, in God. Because he says, quote, I know that my Redeemer lives, and at last he shall take his stand on the earth, even though my skin is destroyed, yet from my flesh I shall see God. That's a crazy accurate description of eschatology and resurrection from the dead. He believed that he would see God, and that he would see it from his flesh, which is really only talking about the resurrection from the dead, the physical rising from the dead that Christ describes. This is the oldest book of the Bible, and in it, it shows an unprecedented understanding of eschatology, which would be borne out by the rest of the Bible, the patriarchs, and the biblical writers, thousands of years later. This short 2-verse declaration of faith is what carried Job, probably, through his torments and bitterness, even though he time and time again doubted the Lord's intentions for him, and accused him to his face so often. So you can have both things going on at once. This is the duality of man. This foresight on his part is mind-boggling, of course, and speaks to the skill with which the antediluvian knowledge of God was passed on from the garden of paradise, heaven, on earth, through oral tradition by the post-diluvian peoples. I believe that the antediluvian peoples who lived in the garden, and after they lived in the garden, they knew of eschatology. God spoke to them very freely in those days, and they knew this much, that God would return, and of course they knew the seed would come, and God would stand on earth again, even though he left earth, and he would come again and establish his reign, and there would be eternal life. And death would be destroyed, Yeah, so it's also incredibly ironic to note that Job ardently says, oh, that my words were written in a book, that with an iron stylus and lead they were engraved in the rock forever. And here we are, reading the same words and studying them to this day. And that's basically it. Although, the context for... never mind. Okay. And that's the end of day 11. Thanks for watching, everyone. And I'll see you in the next one. God bless.